Hello, everybody, and welcome to our last brief for the foreseeable future. Today, we're going to be talking about emotional resiliency abroad and prioritizing your mental health. My name is Ashton Troxel. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am joined by my co-host,
Callie. I am Callie Rouse. I am also an intercultural programs advisor at CGIS, and my pronouns are also she, her, hers.
And so today we're going to be diving into mental health and how it relates to your study abroad experience. And it doesn't necessarily have to apply to studying abroad. It could also apply to travel in general. So what are the intersectionalities of protecting your mental health and study abroad? So typically when you travel, you're going to be in a new location for quite some time. You're probably stressed out, you're anxious, and that is going to be exacerbated by all these new experiences that you'll be going through, such as trying to navigate a language you may or may not know, the new diets you're going to be experiencing, cultural norms, family dynamics if you stay in a host family. It's a lot to adjust for, but a lot of those stressors can be mitigated if you start thinking about them prior to going abroad. So that is why we want you to think about your mental health before you even start searching for a program. So why does it matter? As I had mentioned before, there's a lot of pressures as you're integrating into a new society, which could affect current mental health conditions, or you could develop some while you're abroad. And we're here to tell you that the ups and downs of adjusting to a new culture are completely normal. We also want to recognize that you're going to be away from your normal support systems, whether it's your friends and family or just the American way of doing things. When you come into an office here at U of M, someone is there to help you, to guide you, but when you go abroad, your experience may be very isolating and independent. So how is that going to affect your mental health? And then we also want to address the fact that study abroad isn't always amazing and life-changing, although it can be those things. We recognize that it can also be really daunting, challenging, and oftentimes we may not see the benefits until, a year after the experience or several years after the experience. So preparation is going to help you through the process and ease those highs and lows of adjustment. And if you're struggling here on campus, going abroad isn't going to magically fix all of that. So just keep that in mind as we go through all of our tips, tricks, and advice today to help you prepare for a balanced mental and physical well-being abroad. So depending on where you are in your study abroad journey, you may be at the very beginning, you may just be considering it. So we really want you to start thinking about what's important to you and what helps you maintain a healthy lifestyle here on campus, because those are going to be factors that you're going to consider when choosing a program abroad. So looking into the housing, if you need an accommodation, can your program actually supply that accommodation? We have a lot of students who ask these questions after they're committed to a program, and some students are able to get the accommodation they need, and others it's more challenging. So start having these conversations early on. Some of our programs provide a lot of support on site. They're used to hosting American students, but others, you're pretty much on your own. You're highly independent. So talking about that with your CGIS advisor is going to be important. So doing the research on the front end is key here for you to have a successful time abroad. On the right-hand side of the screen, we have our diversity handbook and a host of resources for students and the questions that you should be asking if you have mental health challenges or sensory disabilities. So start having these conversations early. So I'm going to transition to Callie, who's going to continue preparing for travel.
Yeah, so one of the major things I recommend thinking about is managing your expectations prior to departure. So when I think about this, I always think of the time when coming into my senior year of college, I went abroad to Latvia to do research with locals regarding my honors thesis. And I was so excited, and I had some people prepared in advance to me. And then I was preparing to learn other things, and it was going to be so wonderful, and I was gonna get so ahead on my thesis, and I had all these ideas about it. And I managed to get myself so wound up about what it was supposed to be like as an experience that when it didn't level up to my kind of uncharted like idea of what it should have been, I got really stressed out, and I was like, why is this not going as well as I thought it would? And it was because I hadn't properly managed my expectations about what could I actually do in a length of 3 weeks being abroad. And I did learn a lot, and was a really interesting experience for me. But I think it's always really important for you to think about, like the constraints of your experience, as well as, like the outer limits of your experience and things like that. That like you can do a lot, but like you don't have infinite amount of time and infinite amount of energy. And so make sure to think about these kind of things ahead of time. On a similar note, we highly recommend researching your country. So attitudes around mental health are going to be really different around the world. For example, Argentina, it's super normal to have a therapist, and people will talk openly about having a therapist there. Whereas in Japan, people don't talk about mental health challenges, and it's much more stigmatized to talk about it and admit to having mental health challenges and things like that. So it can be helpful, if you're going to be dealing with some of these challenges going in, knowing how the society deals with these kind of things can be helpful and help prepare you, and know, like, is it going to be like comfortable and safe for me to disclose that I have a depression and things like that in my host country. Services for students with disability. I'm going to talk about this more in depth in the next slide, but they are great friends when it comes to preparing for travel. You can look at your visa letter that you have on campus, and then talk about, traveling abroad as an even more large scale, like not even just in classes, but like what is your daily life going to look like that's different if you do have accommodations already here, what would those accommodations look like abroad, and things like that. And medication preparation. So if you take any medication, we highly recommend doing your research early as to whether your medications are going to be allowed abroad. For example, a really common one that students have challenges with is stimulant medications, like those for ADHD. Those can be hard to get into certain countries or impossible to get into certain countries. So again, like reiterating Ashton's point, researching early can be really important to let you know, like maybe Japan is not a good country to go to because they don't allow certain stimulants into the country. So talking further about accommodations, so for students who need accommodations abroad, you should be working with the SSD office with the Disability Accommodations Abroad form, which you've linked here. This form is super long and comprehensive and touches on a bunch of different things. This is just a snapshot of some in-class accommodations that students might have here and then want to transfer abroad. It's really important to be having these conversations because not everything may be able to be accommodated abroad. The ADA is not, applicable beyond US borders. And so it's really important to be aware of this going in and having an informed understanding of what your experience is going to be like abroad. Additionally, housing accommodations. So if you have need for housing accommodations in particular, there is a specialized process for this because housing is something that gets set up really early on in programs, oftentimes. And so this is actually required of students to submit within 10 days of committing to it, or after committing to a program. And so the reason why this is so early is because getting a housing, especially if a specialized housing situation like a single room, can be complicated. And so they need to know about it early on. How the process actually works is that students have a Google form that is available on our website under the disability accommodations section. The students fill out, and then they attach a letter from one of their regular academic, or not academic, regular mental health or regular like PCP providers. And finally, the UHS office will review the request. So we don't make review on these. There is a doctor over in the UHS office who makes reviews and makes approvals in regards to housing accommodations. And healthy coping mechanisms. So you're going to be in a different environment, potentially like halfway around the world. So what are you going to do when you encounter challenges? So, for example, thinking about what do you do when you're having a hard day in the U.S. For me, if I am like trying to work through something, I often call up my sister and I'm like, okay, I need to talk this out. I need to like think about like what am I going to do with this situation. Well, that's a little harder to do when she might be in the middle of work, she might be sleeping, and there's a pretty short window of time where we're both going to be available in a day to be able to have those kind of conversations with each other. So thinking about how is that those kind of coping mechanisms going to be different from abroad, and how can you adapt those to your new location? Um, I also highly recommend do nothing days. So these are, as the name says, your plan that day is to do absolutely nothing and feel absolutely no guilt about doing nothing. I feel like there is so much like pressure to just be constantly doing things, constantly traveling when you're studying abroad, that you need to give yourself permission to do absolutely nothing so that you can like mentally readjust and reset and get yourself kind of like at ease. I also recommend, if you're having challenges, talking about them with friends and family, like, like how I do when I'm working through something, but kind of like maybe having a set up time where you know that you're both going to be available. And so, okay, I remember that I'm going to have this time to chat with my friends about, things that I'm going through. If you don't have an outlet in the moment via a person, journaling and blogging can be really great, and also kind of leave a record for you to think back on later. Exercising can be a really wonderful outlet. If exercise is really important for your mental health, maybe like even before you go abroad, thinking about, is there a gym membership I can get to, or is there like a running path near my campus? It can be good to think about. And talking to local staff. Local staff are, often trained in working with students around issues of culture shock and adjustment, and dealing with stress and the kind of the weird, unique situations you might go to as a study or deal with as a study abroad student. So definitely talk with them too. And then finally, there are even more recommendations on things to do on the Resilient Traveling website available through
Yeah, so to wrap things up, there are a lot of resources. Please come and talk to your CGIS Study Abroad advisors at any time throughout the process. We are here to help you. So as Kelly mentioned, the on-site staff can also be helpful. There are some cultural considerations in mind when talking to on-site staff. So if that's a question that you have, like CGIS is here to help you as well. Also, talking to your friends or your cohort members on the program, they're going through the same transition as you are. So making those bonds can be really fulfilling. And last but not least, we do have all of our students enrolled in GO Blue Insurance, which covers mental health services on site. So it can be very challenging to find a new therapist or a new provider. So that's something that you want to start talking with your current provider about. Perhaps they can write a letter to who you'll be seeing abroad, detailing, this is what we're working on. So you don't have to rehash everything that you've been going through with your current provider. So come up with a game plan to make that transition easier. And we want to mention that CAPS, although they will not be able to provide counseling services with you while you're out of the state of Michigan, they do have a lot of really great resources on their website. So thank you for joining us today. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is our last CGIS brief for now. It has been a fun journey. We're sad to see it end, but who knows, maybe in the future we'll be back.